In this example, we're going to look at how we can import an STL model and using four-sided machining create a full 3D model. We're going to start by looking at how we can create a pocket that's going to be the exact size as our material block in order for us to get the correct alignment. Once we've run that pocket, we'll then look at importing the model for the top side of St. Hugh. We'll then look at running the bottom side of St. Hugh as well. We'll look at how we create the toolpaths for each of those sides. We'll then think about the actual side of St. Hugh, so we're looking at the left and the right hand side, which will then need to create a new jig to house the new dimensions. So again, we'll look at creating that pocket jig to begin with, in which we'll then look at the other two files where we look at importing the left and the right hand side and how we run the toolpaths for each one of those. So let's just go to File and Close. So let's go and create a new file. So I'm going to start with a width of 3 inches, height of 12 inches and a material thickness of 0.8. Okay, I'm going to set my XY position in the centre, and then we're going to go ahead and press OK. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create my jig. Now I've already got my block of material. So my block of material is 3 inches wide, 12 inches long, and then it's 1.5 inches deep. Okay, so I need to create a jig that's going to house that. I'm going to create my jig out of just some 0.8 sheet of MDF. And so the first thing I need to do is draw that jig. So we're going to go and draw a rectangle. Just going to snap to this point here, snap to the bottom area here. So we're doing that around the entire shape of my block of material. So that's the 3 inches by 12 inches. And then we could just close that down. Okay, now in order for me to create this pocket, I need my tool to fit around the entire area of the rectangle. So I need to create some fillets, as my 1/4 inch tool is not going to fit into this corner here, and I need to make sure that we have the whole of this rectangular shape pocketed out so we can fit my block of material in there to hold that block in place. So let's go and create some fillets. So I'm going to use the Create Fillet tool, and I'm going to give that a tool radius of 0.13. Okay, so it's just a little bit bigger than the radius of my 1/4 inch end mill. Okay, we're just going to go dog bone fillets, and I'm just going to apply them to each corner, and we just put that in there and that in there. And to double check that they fit, I'm going to draw a circle, diameter 1/4 inch, press Create, close that down. Then let's just take that, and then if we just zoom into this area here, we can see that my tool is going to come round and it's going to fit nicely in there so that we get the entire corner of the area that I want to pocket out. Okay, so we know that's going to fit in there, so let's just delete that circle, and then we'll just use the option here to zoom to fit, and then we'll go over to the Toolpaths tab. So I'm going to set up our material. Now if you plan to actually machine the examples shown in this tutorial, then it's very important that you calculate all the toolpaths using parameters and settings that are safe and appropriate for your particular machine, the tooling that you have available and the material that you are using. So let's just go and set this up. So we're going to set Z0 off the top of the block. Material thickness we're working with is 0.8. XY position, lower left hand corner. This is going to be my reference point, and this is the key to keeping the whole part aligned every time we flip the part over. Now because we're working with a part which you'll see shortly in a minute when we introduce St. Hugh, now we're working with a part that is 3 inches wide, 12 inches long and 1.5 inches thick. So you can see straight away we've got 3 different dimensions. So when we come to cutting the sides of St. Hugh, we need to create another jig that's going to represent the shape of the side of St. Hugh, and we'll come to that later on when we go to look at St. Hugh itself. Okay, so here, so this is our absolute reference point, lower left hand corner here. And then we can just check all the other settings. I'm happy with those. Let's just press OK. Okay, so I'm going to select that vector. I'm going to run a pocket toolpath. Cut depth, we're going to cut down 0.6. I'm going to use 1/4 inch end mill. I could just check some of the settings in here. I'm happy with those, so we'll just call that one pocket, press calculate, and then we could just preview that. We're not really going to see anything because it's just going to clear everything away. And so once we've done this pocket, we can then move on and start thinking about the actual model itself. Okay, so you can see it's going to do that in 5 passes. I think we can, so that was the last pass there, and as I said, you won't really be able to see anything because we're working with the entire job space. Let's close that down. I'm going to save this. I'm going to say File, Save As, and then in the project folder I'm going to call this one St. Hugh Jig Top Bottom. Okay, so this is for the top and the bottom. Press Save and you can access that from the project folder. Okay, so now I'm just going to work in the same setup. So I'm just going to delete this toolpath here. So delete that one. I'm going to switch back over to the main part, as I'll eventually save this out as the actual model itself. So let's just go and tile our windows here. Okay, so what I'm also going to do is I'm just going to go back into my job setup and just put that back to the center. This is going to help for when I import the STL model. So I have my XY position in the center there. So then we can press OK. And we're going to go into the modeling tab and let's bring that model in. So let's go to import a component or a 3D model, and in the St. Hugh files folder we're going to bring in sthugh.stl. Okay, so this STL model is courtesy of lincoln3dscans.co.uk. So here we've got our model, so what we need to do is position that within our block of material. So this is the block that we have pre-sized already, so we just need to position him to fit in there nicely. So we're going to start the initial orientation. I can see it, we can see the back of St. Hugh there, so I'm just going to switch to the bottom. Okay, now he's upside down, so let's just rotate that about z-axis -180. Okay, now I've got him in the right initial orientation there. So now we need to think about the size of St. Hugh. Now, as I said, we're working with 12 inches by 3 inches. Now, we're not going to bring St. Hugh up to 12 inches because we've got to remember we want to have some area at the bottom and at the top to have as a contact point within our jig to hold the model in place. And this will make sense as we start to work through some of the toolpath side of things. So let's just go and give St. Hugh a height of 8 inches. Okay, so you can see if we just apply that to see how that looks. Okay, so that's not too bad. And we can take a look at our x value and our z value. Now, our x value is at 2.6869. Now, I could, just to help myself out when it comes to the toolpath side of things, when I set up my material, I might just round this up to 2.7. I'm not going to really distort this a lot because it's such a small amount that I'm rounding up to. So to do that, I'm just going to uncheck lock XYZ ratio. That way I can just alter each one of these values individually without it affecting any of the other values. So let's just change that to 2.7, and then if I just press apply, you can see there wasn't much of a change there, so that's okay. I'm also going to change the z value and make that 1.4. So I'm rounding that up, so let's just check, see how much difference that makes. I'll make that to 1.4 and then press apply. Okay, so again, there's not much difference because we're only doing it by very, very small values. Okay, if we just use the option here to center the model, bring that into the center, we can see how he looks. Okay, so we've got him at a height of 8 inches. We've got him at a width of 2.7. Okay, now the reason for that is we are working with a material block that is 12 inches long and it's 3 inches wide. And so that extra 0.3 space that I'm going to have surrounding the left and the right side of St. Hugh is just so I can go in there and just remove the material using a pocket toolpath, and you'll see that shortly. Okay, so we've got a Z depth of 1.4. Now, our material thickness is 1.5. And I've put that at 1.4 just so that we have a gap above and a gap below our model so that we avoid any flat spots. Okay, so that's going to have a gap above of 0.05 and a gap below of another 0.05. And so that's the reason for putting the Z value at 1.4. So we've got that in the centre. We know that's in the centre because we use this centre model option here. And now we move on to the 0 plane position in the model. Now you can see all the sort of shadow area here is sat below the 0 plane. Now we want to cut all of St. Hugh out, so we want to push that 0 plane all the way to the bottom so we can get as much of the model as we can in view, so you can see how that will look. Okay, so that's the top of St. Hugh. Let's go ahead and press OK. So let's take a look at him in the 3D view. Okay, so you can see we've got a lot of vertical walls within that model there, and that's just the way the software works. We just work with sort of relief work. That's why we're not getting the underside of St. Hugh. Okay, so we've got all of that vertical wall to work with. So now we need to think about how we're going to hold the model within our block of material. We can't just cut this out, otherwise it'll just fall out. So we need to think of how we're going to hold that in place. Now if we go into the clip art tab, okay, you can see we've got a folder here called 3D tabs. So now you can access that in the project folder. And let's just take a look at what we've got. So you can see we've got lots of different types of tabs in there. And I'm going to go with the rectangular 0.75. So I'm just going to double click that to put that in place. So you can see that's in the center there. I'm going to go into the drawing tab and I'm just going to rotate that about its center point. I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees and press apply. Then close that down. And then I'm simply just going to hold down shift with that selected and just drag that up to the top area over here. Okay, just zoom in a little. You can see it's sort of overhanging St. Hugh, so I'm just going to hold down shift and just bring that in a little bit. Something like this shape here, and we'll just pull that up a little bit more. So let's have a look in the 3D view. Okay, you can see it's a very thin tab. I need to really maximise that. So with that selected, let's go into the modelling tab. I'm going to look at the properties of that. So you can see it's at 0.1106. I'm going to knock that up to 1 inch, press space to enter that in. We can see that's lifted that up, and so we know we're going to have a tab that's going to be 1 inch thick on the frontal top side of St. Hugh. Okay, with that selected, I'm just going to simply create a copy to go at the bottom. So let's close that down. Select that again, go into the drawing tab. Let's use the mirror option, flip about job center, create a mirrored copy. I'm going to flip vertical and close that down. Now we can see that this tab at the bottom is a little bit too high for our model. Okay, so we need to look at decreasing that one. So let's go in there and let's just bring that down to say 0.8 and maybe bring that down to 0.7. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We can close that down. And I could even look at maybe sort of hand finish in this area, but I need to make sure that I have quite a bit of depth in this tab to ensure that my model sits in place. So that's our tabs. So let's put that back in Z. So now I need to think about creating some vectors and vector boundaries for us to machine into. So the first one that we're going to create is sort of the outline of St. Hugh. So with that selected, let's go into the modelling tab. We're going to use this option here to create a vector boundary, and we can see it's created that. I'm then going to take that vector boundary and I'm going to offset that. So let's offset that outwards by 1/4 of an inch, press offset, and we can close that down. And so the reason for that offset is so that I'd still have some tab in place. I can't just cut around directly around St. Hugh, otherwise he'll just fall out of the block of material. So the reason for that is so that we keep that tab in place, intact, with our block of material contact point at the top, and with St. Hugh, and then with the tab, and then at the bottom contact point with the block of material there. Let's just put that back in Z, and then we'll go and zoom to fit. So now we need to create a shape that's going to represent the sort of area that we will be cutting and the area that we won't be cutting. So let's just go and draw a rectangle. Okay, we're going to make that 3 inches by 3.5 inches. We'll make that wider than our block of material and make it a little bit taller than St. Hugh. So we're going to make that 9 inches, and then we'll just make sure that's in the centre. So make that X0, Y0, press create and close. Okay, so this is the area that we'll be looking at cutting away, and this part at the top and this part at the bottom is going to be our contact point between the block of material, the model, and this is what will be sat within our pocket shape, so it's going to keep that in place. So let's just go and think about some more toolpaths that we need to create. Well, we're going to have a block of material. So the first toolpath we really want to create is a toolpath that's going to cut away some of the excess material that we don't need. So a lot of the side of St. Hugh. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this tab here, go to the modelling tab and just create a boundary. And I'll do the same for this tab here, create a boundary there. I'm then going to take that vector, shift and select that vector, shift and select that vector, and then I'm just going to move that to a layer, just call that new layer. It's just going to be a temporary layer for now, pocket. Just call that pocket, and then we'll just make that not visible, press OK. I'm going to take this outer vector, right mouse click, and say copy to layer, pocket, and let's just go to our layers tab, switch off layer 1, switch on the pocket, make sure that's the active one, and then I'm just simply going to trim away the areas that I don't need. So that's everything inside, so I take that away, this and this, and so I'm left with the outer areas between that rectangle shape and the overall outline of St. Hugh, along with the tabs, because we don't want to cut into the tabbed areas. So let's just take those vectors, right mouse click, say move to layer, layer 1, let's go to our layers tab, we can delete that layer now, so let's delete it, switch on layer 1, and then we can see we've got all the vectors that we need now to go ahead and create some toolpaths. So let's go and switch over to the toolpaths tab, so use that option there. Now the first thing we need to do is set up our material. Now we've still got this set up as if we're working with that pocket shape, so we need to change that. So let's go to material setup. Material thickness we're working with is 1.5 inches. We're going to set our XY position in the lower left hand corner. We must make sure that we do that because that's where we're referencing from this pocket shape. Okay, so this block of material we're going to carve St. Hugh out of is going to sit in this pocket shape here, and we set the XY to be in the lower left hand corner there, so we must make sure that we have that the same in both files. Okay, so with that selected there, we then now move on and we can think about the model position in the material. Okay, so we've got a gap above, well, we can see the model thickness is 0.13998. So what I should do really is just quickly go back over to the modelling tab, go into the properties, select St. Hugh, and let's just round that up to 1.4, and then press space to enter that in. We can close that down, and then we could go back over to the toolpaths tab. So let's just undraw the design tab on the left there. Okay, so we can see it's updated. Model thickness is now 1.4, and so we have a space of 0.1. Now we want to have a gap above and below of 0.05, and that's just to ensure that we don't get any flat spots when we're cutting the top side of St. Hugh, and then when we turn that over we want to make sure that we have that 0.05 on the bottom to ensure we don't have any flat spots when we start cutting into the bottom side of St. Hugh. Okay, so again, let's just check everything. I'm happy with the settings there, so I'm going to go ahead and press OK. So the first toolpath we're going to create is the pocket. We're going to clear the material outside the surrounding area of St. Hugh. And that's just going to make it easier for us when we turn the part over and cut on the back side, and ultimately when we cut the side there won't be any material there. So let's take those vectors. I'm going to select that one, shift and select this vector here. Let's go to the pocket toolpath. Okay, start depth is going to be 0, it's going to be at the top of our block of material, and we're cutting down all the way, so we're going to do that at 1.5 inches. So at this point it's a good time to make some decisions about the tools you're going to use. In this case I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, so please make sure that your tool would fit down the 1.5 inches in that block of material. So I'm happy to do that, so I'll just go and use that end mill there. And then we could go down. I'm going to do that in a raster motion. I'm going to profile last, and I'm going to do that at a raster angle of 90 degrees. It's going to go up the y-axis. Call that pocket, and then we could go ahead and calculate that. Let's just preview that toolpath. You can see it's removing all of the excess material on the right hand side, and then it's going to move on and remove everything on the left hand side. And so you can see straight away that we are left with the top block and the bottom area of our block intact, and this is the area that's going to keep our model in position, and it's going to keep it in line because we've got that sat in our pocket shape that we created. So now we can start to think about the 3D toolpath. So let's select the outer vector for St. Hugh there. We'll just close the preview toolpaths option down. And the first toolpath we're going to run is the 3D roughen toolpath. So in here, again, we're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to use the selected vector, so we're not going to have an offset because we've already offset the boundary vector of St. Hugh. Machine allowance of 0.03, and then what we're going to do is we're going to apply a Z-level raster cut on that. We're going to raster in the Y direction, so it's going to follow the grain of wood. So it's going to go in a Y motion up and down. We're going to call that one 3D roughen, and we'll press calculate there. That's just going to work that out for us. Okay, so you can see how that will look. So let's just preview that toolpath. You can see it's just chopping away there at the excess material, just so it makes it safer for us to go in with a smaller tool to finish off St. Hugh. Okay, so that's not too bad. That's okay. What I think I could do with though is going over St. Hugh with another roughen toolpath. So let's go back in there with the roughen toolpath, and this time we're going to do the 3D raster option. So I'm going to raster that along Y again, just to try and get rid of some more material there. But this is going to follow the shape of our 3D model. So let's just go ahead and call that 3D roughen 2. Press calculate, and this is going to take a while to calculate those toolpaths. Okay, so you can see that there, so let's just go ahead and preview that toolpath. We can see it's going in sort of the Y axis there, and you can see it's taking away a lot of material. We're getting something that resembles the model a little bit more than what we had earlier. Okay, so it's taking a while to do that. This toolpath has a little bit more work to do. Okay, and so you can see how that looks. So you can see now when we go in with a smaller tool, it's going to be a lot easier for us to cut away to get the detail. So let's close that down, and then with that vector selected, let's go and run a finish toolpath. Okay, in this case we're going to use an 1/8 inch ball nose. Now again, please be wary of the tools that you use and ensure that you have the correct length, as we're going to cut pretty much all the way through. So we're going to go at ultimately the bottom area is going to be at 1.45 inches. Okay, so we're just leaving that 0.05 at the bottom there as the gap below. So you want to make sure that your tool is safe to use in this case. So again, I'm going to use the 1/8 inch ball nose. I'm going to use that selected vector with no offset. I'm going to raster that, and again, let's just do that at 90 degrees so it travels in the Y direction. And then we could call that 3D finish. We'll press calculate. It's going to take a moment to work that out. There's a lot more detail here for the software to calculate. Okay, so you can see how that would look. Let's just preview that. Okay, so you can see we've got this sort of halo area, and that's the 0.05 gap below that we've left on there. So that's what that is. Okay, so you can see the detail looks okay, so I'm happy with that. So we could go ahead and close that down. Okay, so at this point, we just go back into the preview there. This is what we'll be left with. And so this is where we need to turn our block of material over. So we can turn that over 180 degrees, and then we need to calculate the back side of St. Hugh. So let's just go and save this file. So go to File, Save As, and we're going to save this one as St. Hugh Top. Okay, so just change that name there. So St. Hugh Top, save that. And then we could go and start to create the bottom side of St. Hugh. So let's just close that down, and then we'll just close this session down. I'm going to go and create a new file. So again, exactly the same dimensions, 3 by 12, Z0 on the top. Okay, we're going to make that 1.5. Just to set this up, we're going to set our XY position in the center, working with very high modeling resolution, and then we could go ahead and press OK. So let's go and import St. Hugh. So let's go to the Modeling tab. We're going to import a component or a 3D model, St. Hugh STL, press open. Okay, so we've got the back in view, so now I just need to alter the size. So again, I'm going to make Y 8, press apply, then we're going to uncheck lock XYZ, we're going to round this one up to 2.7, I'm going to round that one up to 1.4, press apply. I'm going to make that in the centre, and then we're going to push that 0 plane all the way down to the bottom, then we can go ahead and press OK. So let's just go and to view there, I'm just going to go and tile our windows vertically. First thing we need to do is create a vector boundary, so we're going to do that by pressing that option there. We're going to the drawing tab, we want to create that offset, so with that vector selected, let's go to offset, outwards, 1/4 of an inch, exactly the same as we set it up before, press offset and then we can close that down. Okay, so now I need to put my tabs in. Now I want to make sure my tabs are in the same position as we had on the front side. So what I could simply do is just bring up the file we worked with earlier, so here's the top. I'm going to take this tab, shift and select this tab, and while I'm here I'm also going to select these vectors here. This is just purely just to double check the alignment to ensure that when we turn St. Hugh over on the top side, so we've got the bottom side ready to cut, that everything lines up with the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to take those, going to right mouse click, press copy, and then if we just go back into the back side, I'm just going to right mouse click, press paste. Okay, so you can see it's brought that in. It's brought that in a different position, and that's because the other file, we ultimately set the XY to be in the lower left hand corner, and this is set up to be in the centre at the moment. That's okay. So I'm just going to take those everything that we've just pasted in there, and I'm just going to go and press F9 on the keyboard. That's going to bring that into the centre, and then I'm going to use the mirror selected objects option. Okay, we do not want to create a mirrored copy, so I'm going to uncheck that, but I'm going to make sure we have flip about job centre, and that's important because we have everything set up in the centre when we import that STL model. So we're going to do that about the centre, and I'm just going to use the option to flip horizontal. We can see that that would be a horizontal flip, so let's do that, and we can see that that is perfectly lined up, so I'm happy with what we've got there. So let's just close that down, and then I'm just going to deselect the tabs like so, and then I'm just going to delete those vectors that we just pasted in there. Okay, so we've got our outer vector, we've got the boundary vector, we've got our tabs in the exact position that they'd be in when we turn the part over. So the next thing we need to do is think about the heights of our tabs. We want to make sure that we don't cut away our tabs altogether. So let's just think about the bottom side here. This is the easiest side to think about. Now, essentially when we created the top side, so if we just open that file, okay, so here's the top, we know that the tab is going to be at the bottom here. So we want to make sure that our tab is going to come up to almost to the top of our model. So let's just have a look at the bottom there. So we want to bring that right up to the area just before the cloak. So we don't want to go higher than that. We just want to bring it just below the cloak area here. So what we could do is we could just alter that in here. So let's just select that little rectangle, and then let's just make that say 1.4, then press space to enter that in. Okay, so see it's a little bit too big, so let's just make that 1.3. You can see that's just sat nicely underneath there. So we know that we're going to have tab still intact there. So I'm just going to leave that as that is. Let's think about this one. Now if we go into the original file, the front side, okay, so the top tab that we've got here, if we just go to the properties, we know it's 1 inch. Okay, so we can see that it starts around here, and then the end just goes to the bottom of the plane here. So we don't want to cut too much away, so let's just open up the back side. Okay, so you can see that it's currently at 1 inch, and that's what it was for the top side. So I'm going to set the shape height of this to be say 0.85, just to ensure that I have quite a bit of material left in there for when we cut that out. Okay, so you can see that there. So you can see it's going to come into the top of my model, but that's okay. I can look at hand finishing that myself. So let's just close that down, put that back in Z, and now we're ready to go and run some toolpaths. So let's switch over to the Toolpaths tab. Well, first, before we do that, let's just take our model and just double check the height of that. Okay, let's just round that up to 1.4, press space to enter that in, and then we can close that down. Okay, I'm just going to undraw the drawing tab there. So we're going to take this outer vector here. Remember, we've already cut away the material from the top side with that pocket, so we don't need to worry about creating another pocket on this toolpath. So the first thing we need to do is set up our material. Okay, we're setting our Z0 top of the block, material thickness working with is 1.5. XY position, we want that in the lower left hand corner. We are referencing from the same point from the top side of St. Hugh and from our jig that this block of material is sat within. Okay, so make sure that's in the lower left. We're going to have a gap above 0.05, so remember we left that 0.05 on the top and on the bottom there, and then we could just go ahead and press OK. So with that vector selected, let's go ahead and run our first toolpath. So again, we're going to do 3D roughing toolpath. So we're going to do the same toolpath that we did for the top. So we're going to do a Z-level raster strategy. Okay, we're going to use a selected vector, no offset. We're going to raster in the Y direction. I'm going to call that 3D roughing, and let's press calculate. Software is just going to work that out for us. Let's just preview that. We can see how that looks. Now, as I said, remember this material here will not actually be there because we've already cut that away. And this is just one of the limitations to the software in that we can't preview more than one side at a time. So we have to always remember that and think about how the part looks on the front side, and now that we're creating the back, how they will match up. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's close that down. We're going to do another 3D roughing toolpath. This time we're going to do a 3D raster along Y, press calculate. And again, software is just going to take a moment to work that out for us. And then let's just preview that toolpath. Okay, it's just taking a while to work out. It's a lot of information to put through there. And there we have that part. Okay, so let's just close that down. With that vector still selected, let's run a 3D finishing toolpath. I'm going to use an 1/8 inch ball nose in this case. Use a selected vector. I'm going to do that in raster strategy. I'm going to do that 90 degrees, so it's going in the Y axis. Let's press calculate. The software is just going to work that out for us. And then we could go ahead and preview that toolpath, see how that looks. Okay, so I'm happy with that. That's brilliant. So let's just close that down. So at this stage we'll go ahead and save this file. So let's go to File, Save As. We're going to call this one St. Hugh, and this time we're going to call this one Bottom. And then we'll press Save. And now we've got our top and we've got our bottom. So now I need to think about the sides of St. Hugh. So we're looking at the side, the right and the left. So let's just go and close this down. So go to File, Close, and we're going to go and create a new file. Now when we're turning that block of material on its side, we need to swap the width and the thickness dimensions. So now the width is going to be 1.5 and the material thickness we're working with is going to be 3 inches. So we could go ahead and press OK. And so again, our first point of call is creating that jig. We need to make sure that we've got a jig in place that's going to hold the side of our material block. So again, let's go and draw a rectangle. I'm going to snap to the top corner, snap to the bottom corner. You see that's 12 by 1.5. That's what we just set our job position to be. So that vector selected, let's just go and create some fillets. So again, we're going to use 0.13 radius there. So let's just go and attach those to each of the corners. Then we'll just put that in there, close that down. So what I really need to do is go to the Toolpaths tab. Okay, we need to set up our material. Okay, now I've actually set this up as if we were working with a material block. What I should have done is set this to our piece of MDF. So we're going to put that material thickness down to 0.8. I'm going to go in the lower left hand corner, so this is our point where we're going to reference from, and then we could go ahead and press OK. And then we're just going to go and run a pocket toolpath. So let's select that vector, run a pocket. I'm going to cut down 0.6 in this case, use a 1/4 inch end mill. You can see it's going to do that in 5 passes. Just going to raster that. We'll press calculate, and then we could preview that, but we're not going to see anything, so I'm not going to preview in this case. But we've got our toolpath there, so we'll go and output that to our CNC machine. So now that we've got our jig or our pocket in place to hold the side of our block of material down, we now need to think about getting the side of St. Hugh in. So let's just save this file. So we're going to go File, Save As. We're going to call this one St. Hugh Jig, and I'm just going to change the top and bottom there to sides. And then we could go ahead and press Save. And then we're just going to go to File, Close. I'm going to create a new file. Okay, so again, 1.5 by 12 by 3 inches. Again, I'm just going to make sure that's in the centre for now, just for positioning my model. And then we could go ahead and press OK. So let's go into the modelling tab, and we're just going to go and import a model, and import St. Hugh, and press open. This time we want to do a side, so we're just going to pick either right or the left. We need to do both anyway, so we'll just go to right in this case. And then again, we need to alter the model size. So here, this is always going to be the same. It's going to be 8. Let's press apply. And we'll just centre that just to put that in position so you can see how that looks. And then we're just going to unlock XY, and we're going to change the Z to 2.7. We're going to change X to be 1.4. Press apply, centre that to make sure it's in the centre. And we're going to push the 0 plane all the way down to the bottom. And we're going to go ahead and press OK. Okay, so here we have this side view of St. Hugh. Okay, so he's now 2.7 inches high. So now we need to create the vectors for our toolpath. So let's just tile our windows. Let's go to View, and we're going to go Tile Windows vertically. With that component selected, let's just create a boundary. Okay, so you can see we've got that vector there. Let's go into the Drawing tab, and again we're going to go ahead and draw in the offset. So I'm going to offset that outwards by 1/4 inch. And I'm also going to create my rectangle in this case. This is just going to be the area just for visual reference of where the my ends of my material block are. So in here we're going to go with a height of 9 inches, and then we're going to go with a width of say 2 inches, and we're just going to go ahead and press create. Okay, so you can see that there, and then we could just close that down. Now I need to put some tabs in, so let's just go to my clip art tab. I'm just going to import the same size tabs, rectangular 0.75, double click just to put that in. Okay, let's double click that, there we go. Let's go into the Drawing tab with that component selected. Let's just rotate that about its centre point by 90 degrees and press apply. We can close that down. And then I'm just going to shift that up to the top, so keeping that in the centre there. So I'm going to shift that up to the top there, and then what I'm also going to do is just bring that across. This is just to ensure that I'm getting the whole area of where the tab is in place there. So with that tab selected, let's just go and apply some height to that. So let's just go to the Modelling tab, we'll go to the Component Properties, and I'm just going to bring this all the way up to say 2.5. Okay, you can see that's way over there, so I'm just going to make that say 2 inches, sorry, and maybe even just bring that a little bit down, make that 1.5. Make that 1.8. Okay, so this is just to ensure that I'm not going to cut into that tab. Now we've already pretty much cut into the side of St. Hugh from when we did the top side, so it's not really too much to worry about what we're going to cut into on the top here, as we would have really cut the majority of this. All we're really thinking about here is cutting into the areas that we couldn't get to on the top side, for instance behind this wing area here. So now we can cut into that. Okay, so that's that one. So let's just take that, and then we're just going to create a copy on the bottom there. So if that component's selected, let's go to the drawing tab, and then we'll use the option to mirror selected objects. So that's selected. Let's use the option to create a mirrored copy, flip vertical. You can see it's created one at the bottom there. And so then what we need to do is just position this. Now we know that tab at the bottom is positioned flush with the back of St. Hugh. So we're just going to put that roughly in position there, and I'm happy with the height of that as well. Again, like I say, we're not really going to be cutting into a lot of the detail here because we've already cut into it. Now, the next thing we need to think about before we go and create toolpaths is the depth of our part. Now, because we've turned it on its side, we've now increased the amount of depth we're working with. So we're now working with a part, our model is now 2.7 inches deep. Okay, now that's quite deep for regular tools to get down into. So we need to think about how we can overcome this issue. Now what we're going to do here is we're actually going to add in a modelling plane, well a zero plane. We're going to push that halfway, so we're only going to work with half of the model, and then what we could do is cut that half, so 1.5 of this side, and then when we come to do the other side we're going to do the same again, add that zero plane in at 1.5 inches, so at the halfway point, and we'll look at machining the other 1.5 on the other side. Okay, so this is just a safety measure here. So let's just go to the modelling tab, so this model option up here. We're going to use the add zero plane option, and then if we go into the modelling tab, we're going to go into the zero plane, right mouse click, let's just go to the properties. First we want to set that to merge, and then we're going to make the base height 1.5, press space to enter that in. We can see that that's now 1.5 inches high, so we're only just cutting sort of half of the model here. So I'm happy with that, so let's close that down. So now we're ready to go and create some toolpaths. So let's go into the drawing tab, switch over to our toolpaths tab. I'm just going to press F in the 2D view just to fit that, and then we need to set up our material. So let's go to the material setup. So first thing what we need to do is check all of the options in here. So material thickness working with is 3 inches. XY position, we want that in the lower left. The lower left is where we're referencing our jig from, and so once we've cut that jig out and then we cut this part, it's all going to be referenced from the same XY position so that we keep that part aligned, and that's very, very important. Okay, gap above the model, let's just make that halfway. We can see my model thickness is at 2.6998. So let's just go back over to the modelling tab. I'm going to go to St. Hugh, go to the properties, round that up to 2.7, space to enter that in. And we'll just undraw the modelling tab there. And then we'll just update that, make that 0.15 above and below. Not that it really makes a difference because we don't actually have anything there. And then we could go ahead and press OK. But the whole reason that we are doing that is just so we're keeping everything within the centre of our block of material, and that will help us keep everything aligned. So let's just go ahead and press OK there. I'm going to take that outer vector. This time I'm only just going to run one roughing toolpath this time. We'll just do a 3D raster along Y, and then we'll press calculate. Now this would have already cut the majority of the material out when we did our top and bottom passes. So all we're doing here is really getting into the detail that we can't do. For instance, the sort of behind that wing, as that would be classed as an undercut when we would have cut that on the top side. So we're just getting into all of the little details that we can't reach when we run the top toolpaths or the bottom toolpaths. Okay, so you can see that the software is just creating a little simulation of how that will look. And again, you've got to remember that a majority of this material that is cutting away will not actually be there because we would have already cut that away. So when we run this, it will probably do a little bit of air cutting because it's cutting away at material that isn't there. Okay, so you can see it's just taking a while to create that. There's a lot of detail there for it to work out what needs to be cut. and so you can see we've got the finished part there. Let's close that down, and then we're just going to run a 3D finish toolpath. So what we could actually do is just use this, the actual boundary vector, as we've already cut away everything outside there. So we're just going to use that one, go to the 3D finish. We're not going to offset that because we've already cut that away. We're just looking at going into the details in this case. Okay, I'm going to do a raster. Let's make that 90 degrees so it travels up in the Y axis. Press calculate. The software's just going to take a minute to work that out for us. And we can see that there, so let's just preview that, see how that looks. And that's the finished side. So we're going to get some nice detail in areas such as behind the wing here, and in some details on the side, like the creases of the sleeve here. So that's the side done. So now we can move on and think about the other side. So this is where we take our block of material and we're going to flip that over into our jig, and we're going to cut the other side. So let's just go ahead and save this out. So we'll close that down. We're going to go to File, Save As. We're going to call this one St. Hugh, and we'll call this one Left, and then press Save. Okay, so that's his. If we're looking at it, that's his. That's the left-hand side. And so let's just go to File, Close, and then we're going to create a new file. So we're just going to look at creating the other side this time. Exactly the same setup. I'm going to go ahead and press OK. Go to the Modeling tab. Let's import St. Hugh for the final time. Press Open. Okay, so this time we're going to look at, if we're looking at it, we're looking at the right-hand side here. So I'm going to use the left option. Okay, so we've got that side in view. So let's just alter these. We're going to make that 8. Uncheck lock XYZ, make that 2.7, we're going to make the X 1.4, press apply, center the model, pull that 0 plane all the way down to the bottom there, press OK, there we have it. And so the next thing we need to do is create vector boundaries and bring those tabs in. And so I could do that just by going into the file we were just in, so the other side here, and just for now I'm just going to make the XY in the center there just so we get everything aligned. Okay, I'm just going to ignore this message. I'm not going to save this file out. I just want to take the vectors and the tabs from this file. So just going to right mouse click, say copy, and then we're going to go into our session here. So let's just go into the drawing tab, tile our windows, and right mouse click, say paste, and then I'm going to use the mirror option. I'm going to flip that horizontally, and we can see now that everything's perfectly aligned, so I'm happy with that. So we can close that down. Okay, again I'm just going to leave the tabs as they are, and then we just need to add in that 0 plane. So let's go to the Modeling tab, go to Model, add 0 plane, properties of that 0 plane, set that to merge so it blends into St. Hugh, and we're going to make that 1.5, space to enter that in. We can close that down. Just go into St. Hugh there, just double check the height, put that to 2.7 and close that down, and we're now ready to create some toolpaths. So let's go to the Toolpaths tab. So again, let's set up our material. Important thing to do here, material thickness 3 inch, XY, we want that in the lower left. Again, we are referencing from where we cut out our pocket shape to ensure that we get correct alignment. Model position in material, we're going to have a gap above of 0.15, okay, so that's just to make sure that our model is dead on in the centre of our block of material, so that matches the other side. Then we could go ahead and press OK. Okay, so again, let's just take that vector, we're going to run a 3D roughing toolpath, we're going to 3D raster that, press calculate, that's just going to work that out for us. Okay, and then we could just go ahead and preview that if we wanted to. So just preview that just to see how that looks. And again, none of this material, or the majority of this material, won't be here because we would have already cut that away when we cut at the top side and at the bottom side. So this is again one of the downfalls of only being able to see one view in the software. So we're just going to use our imagination and try and think about, well, actually a lot of this material won't be there, but when we come to run this toolpath, it will be running probably a lot of, it will be doing a lot of air cutting, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so you can see that we're going to get into details such as this area between his hand and his chest, and so just doing that in ordinary two-sided machining, we would not be able to get that because this area would not be cut into from the side. Okay, so that's just nearly done that there. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's close that down, and then we're just going to take the vector here. I'm going to run that 3D finish toolpath. I'm going to raster that in the Y angle, so we're going to make that 90 degrees. We'll press calculate, and that's just going to work that out for us. And then we can preview that to see how that looks. And we can see that we're getting all of that detail in there. Okay, so I'm happy with what we've got there. So let's just close that down, and that would be the last side, and we should have then have a full 3D model, 4 sides machined. So let's go and save out this file. So we'll go to File, Save As, and we're going to call this one St. Hugh, but we're going to call this one Right. And then press Save. And then you can access all of those files from the project folder. And so that completes this tutorial where we've looked at how we can create a 4-sided part by importing third-party 3D data. We started off by making sure that we had a jig set up to the exact size of our material block for the top and the bottom sides, which we then ran Pocket Toolpath. Once we've done that, we then started to look at importing St. Hugh into our job. So we looked at the top side first, made sure that we set all the dimensions exactly the same as each other, so the same for the top, the bottom, the left and the right. And then ultimately we ran all of the toolpaths to cut the part out. And you can access all of those files within that project folder.